You're listening to
Catholic Sprouts,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith. Hey there, Sprouts. Today is Thursday, May 30th, 2019. This week on the Catholic Sprouts podcast, we have been talking about war. We talked about the two types of anger, a good and holy anger that responds to evil that can lead to a just war if necessary, and the sinful anger that is consumed more with revenge and our own pride. We also talked about how war needs to lead to peace and how complicated it can be to figure out if a war is necessary as a leader in this world. Yesterday, we went through the 4 principles required for a war to be just according to our Catholic faith. And those are that the damage is grave and certain, that there are no other means to end this evil, that success and peace at the end of this all is possible, and finally, that we will never use evil that will produce a worse evil than we are already witnessing, that we won't engage in a horrible evil to end what is going on. Today we are going to talk about a saint. It is Saint Joan of Arc's feast day today. Now the whole reason why we are talking about war is because sometimes we can forget that God has used war himself to bring about his will. In fact, that is the whole story of Saint Joan of Arc. So, Saint Joan of Arc was a poor girl. She grew up on a farm in France. She grew up on a time when France and England were at war. In fact, they had been at war for a long time. The war we now call the 100-Year War between France and Britain. Now, Britain, or England, had been winning lately. In fact, they had been winning so much that the English king was beginning to call himself the King of England and France. However, at the young age of 14, St. Joan of Arc began to hear voices, and she saw St. Michael the Archangel appear to her. They were whispering to her that she needed to go off to war, and at the age of 16, she did this. Now imagine for a minute, way back then when St. Joan of Arc lived, how people thought about a young girl, thinking that she's going to go off to battle. Now, at the time, France had a very weak king. He didn't really believe that they would win this war with England, and he wasn't doing a very good job being a king. However, at 16, Joan of Arc went and appeared before him and begged him to give her an army so that she might lead that army against the English. No one really believed that Joan of Arc was sent there by God, but after she was investigated by several priests and found to be honest, she was granted a small army, and she led that army into a town that had previously been conquered by the British. And guess what? They won. When Joan of Arc went into battle, she carried a flag with Jesus and Mary on it. And she fought very, very bravely. In fact, after this first battle, her and her small army went on to have several more battles, which they won. St. Joan of Arc led the army and often was injured while out there in battle. So the French were suddenly, and for the first time, starting to turn the British back and starting to reclaim some of the lands that they had lost in this 100-year war. However, the King of France was still not a very good man. After a little bit of time, St. Joan of Arc was captured by the British. She was captured, she was put in jail, and since she was a girl and claimed to hear voices, she was put on trial for witchcraft. The British believed that she was a witch. And although she pled innocent, she was convicted and sentenced to death by being burnt at the stake. Now, this simply means that she was tied to a pole. They put a whole bunch of sticks and flammable objects around her and lit it on fire, and that is how she died. However, she remained brave until the end, and she was faithful to Jesus. Her last word was Jesus, and she died when she was only 20 years old. Now, I tell you this story, yes, it has a sad ending, but Joan of Arc was a courageously brave woman. God chose her to go and lead the French army, and she said yes. So clearly, what God saw was happening here wasn't evil, and the only way to respond was with force. So there are a lot of complicated issues around especially modern war. The difference between war during the time of St. Joan of Arc and now is that our weapons are so much worse. We can click a button and kill thousands of people. St. Joan of Arc did not have that. She had to ride a horse into battle and fight with a sword. So we need to be even more discerning about whether war is necessary and whether it will lead to peace. And so, friends, my challenge for you is to pray through the intercession of St. Joan of Arc. She knows what evil is, and she knows that sometimes war is necessary. Pray that she can be an intercessor for our world leaders so that they might clearly discern what is just war and what is not.
That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God intended you to be. One more thing, the Catholic Sprouts podcast will be taking a break from creating new episodes during the months of June and July. However, if your family relies on this podcast as much as mine does, I will be offering an episode recycled from the archives each day of these 2 months. They are my favorite weeks, and I think they are definitely worth listening to again, as the wisdom and truth of the Catholic Church never gets old.